Okay. Okay, so first, I'd like to know your name
Aaron Smith.
and your position at St. Mary's.
I am a public safety officer at the Department of Public Safety at St. Mary's College.
So, what did you do before you became a public safety officer?
Retired.
What did you do before you were retired?
Well, I'm retired from law enforcement.
How long did you work for the police department?
I worked for two departments for a little over 13 years.
And which departments were they?
The Concord Police Department and the University of San Francisco.
What made you choose University of San Francisco?
It was the thought of a free education for my son at the time because he wanted to go to the University of Southern California. So I lateraled over there.
Did you always know that the path you chose, which is law enforcement, was the right choice for you?
No.
It just came to you?
And just because my father was a deputy in Los Angeles. It wasn't something that I overtly wanted to do. I wanted to be a doctor, but just found my way into law enforcement.
Do you ever regret choosing law enforcement?
Yes.
Why is that?
Things I've seen, things I've had to do, it does forever change you.
So, if I may ask, what are your opinions on the current legislation for making gun laws stricter?
Wow, that is a very that's a very hot topic right now, because if you're referring to the California legislature, and on a number of occasions I've had meetings with the now governor of California,
Which is?
Gavin Newsom. I'm not a very big fan of his because I've seen him in various instances, let's just say.
Oh.
But more specifically, if they want to make additional gun laws, California is among the most highly regulated next to Washington, D.C. And they have not been effective because how they seem to target people is after the law-abiding citizens versus what the cause is. They want to go after the effect, but not what the cause is, or the root.
So, do you think that gun laws should be stricter or more lenient?
I think the gun laws should be more effective than what they are, because right now, they are not effective. They don't have what's the word I'm looking for here? It's a tough thing. The effect that they have, the current gun laws, it's more of a band-aid on the solution, because the gun, the weapon, the firearm, is not the problem. It's the people that get the weapons.
You just answered one of my questions. But, so why do you think the people who decide to kill people, like at the San Bernardino shooting, or like malls, schools, or homes, choose to do what they do? Like, do you think it's a matter of a mental issue, or that they had they just wanted to harm someone because of something?
To draw a comparison here, there was a shooting that occurred in Milwaukee. That was a result of the individual's traumatic brain injury. And as far as what that trigger is, I don't know, because I'm not aware of what the backstory is. When I refer to the trigger, was it a financial situation? Was it a loss of a family member? Was it financial difficulties? So that part I don't know. But you mentioned San Bernardino. The shooting that occurred there in the workplace was more of an ideology. It was people declaring their allegiance to ISIS. And if you look at that shooting, that was done over their Christmas break. And it was those two people specifically planned that attack out. It wasn't like a spur of the moment thing, hey, I'm going to go out
So
it was premeditated.
okay, so it was different from like those people that just randomly.
Correct. I mean, again, now we're going to get in like nuances and what is random, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, when you look at an active threat or an active shooter, there is planning that's involved. It's planning that's been occurred or has occurred for 3 to 6 months prior to it happening. And there's a lot of forethought into it. The weapons, access, egress, who is going to be a first target of opportunity. So, there's a lot of questions like that.
Have you ever had any family member, coworker, or close family who's been shot?
Yes. Couple.
My
father and me. Not at the same time.
That'd be a little worrisome. Do you think if you were back in active duty and you were facing a shooter, would emotions cloud your judgment because of someone that's close to you, like, has been hurt? Or would that not affect your...
It wouldn't affect, if I were still working on the streets or the bricks or the beat, that wouldn't come into mind because your training takes over. Because you have a lot of training,
Mm-hmm.
Under stress, you revert to the training.
So, like you just mentioned earlier, the Milwaukee Molson Coors shooting, what do you think the shooter was unstable? Because, like you mentioned, there was a TBI, like a brain injury. Do you think maybe that was why? Like, that was something that triggered him to shoot 6 people in his community?
I think, and again, I'm not a doctor. I only wanted to be one day. But my understanding of the TBI and its effects on people are dependent on the area of the brain that's involved, whether it's, the blunt force trauma or whatever is it's caused from a concussion, from an explosion, what have you. It's my understanding that when people have a reaction, I don't want to say an episode because that's not a quite description,
Mm-hmm.
Or an adequate one, but when they have that episode, reaction, let's call it, okay, or response, that when they're in that state, it's very similar to a child's state of mind, and the child being under the 11 years old, 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So the reaction is going to be of that of a child, so it's going to be very impulsive. So being able to discern, do they believe in their mind that they're doing something wrong, merits further discussions.
So do you think because of the shooting that it would be a safe guess to assume that Milwaukee's department would make gun laws stricter because of this incident, or do you think they'd keep an eye on it?
Well, Milwaukee in the heart, it's basically in the heartland there in Wisconsin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be up to their legislature to pass laws if they deem it necessary to have further restrictions. Because it's my understanding when this person was shot, they were stopped by the police, right?
I believe so. I'm not sure, but I think I'm not sure if he shot himself.
Okay.
So,
But yeah, as far as I would, additional laws, to give you an example, in California, there's over 42,000 different laws just for the vehicle code.
So there's probably a lot more.
So there's so, what is the effect of them? I think in order to have that, there has to be a real change. And it begins with the culture.
It's fine.
Sorry.
That's fine.
It begins with the culture of the firearms, the safety of the firearms. And remember, a firearm is an inanimate object, much like a car.
Yeah. It's the person who holds the car or sits behind the driver's.
Correct.
So, you just, okay, so should we be...
Am I messing you up right there?
No. So, what I'm trying to say is we should be focusing more on how making sure someone who owns a firearm should be if they're stable instead of blaming the object, basically was what you're saying.
Correct.
Because firearms, vehicles, desks, they don't have feet or hands.
Neither does a knife.
So yeah, like basically what you're trying to say is it's more about the person.
Correct.
Like what their intentions are.
Correct.
Okay, so as of 2020, do you think mental disorders are rising in young adults as well as adults?
I do.
And why do you think that mental disorder is rising?
And again, I think that understanding that mental disorders encompasses a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not to create a stigma. I think there's greater awareness and the fact that it's okay to talk to a mental health person, that it's normal, that you shouldn't keep things all bottled up inside you, that you should be able to have that opportunity to speak with a professional.
Because you weren't on the scene in the Milwaukee Molson Coors shooting, do you think it was possible that beside the TBI that there could have been something that happened in his life
Yes.
that caused him to shoot people? Do you think states like Wisconsin, California, Florida, Texas, and like other bigger states should focus more on like finding an effective way to strengthen background checks when someone purchases a firearm without offending like people who have really strong opinions on it? Because I just like the states I just named are states that a lot of people have guns, like Texas and
Florida.
Yeah.
Right.
California, I'm not so sure about, but Texas and Florida, they carry like.
Well, yeah, they have and then you have like the different states that have the constitutional carry aspect. With respect to the background, remember when you buy a firearm, you have to go through a federal firearms licensee. Okay, so you have to go into various systems to find out. I think what they have to do is they have to work on a federal system that works with the state system, because you have to determine, can the individual purchasing the firearm lawfully own it? Are they a convicted felon? Convicted felons is prohibited from owning a firearm or the ammunition. So,
do you think AI should replace humans who sell firearms? Like, somehow make an AI that only focuses on figuring out the way they talk and how their brain works. So like make it really something that can see inside your brain. It's almost like an AI with an MRI that scans your brain.
So it's an MRI AI.
Yeah, MRI. Yeah, basically.
Well, I mean, then again, it goes to who's writing the code, who's responsible for it, right? Because would you really want to entrust that much to either a state or a federal government? Because whoever writes the code is the one who's in command of everything. You know, it's...
So you don't think it's possible yet?
I mean, I think it's possible because you already have things like the polygraph that's been around for 60 or 70 years. Mm-hmm. You also have the CVSA, which is a voice stress analyzer that gives immediate feedback on if someone's telling the truth. So I think it's possible, but it would be questionable to have our government do that. It's too much Big Brother type.
So you think it would create a backlash?
I do. I think it would be fraught with abuse.
So if you think it would create a backlash, when do you think our country could possibly use an AI to determine whether someone should be able to purchase a firearm? Like maybe 70 to 100 years?
I wouldn't say 70 to 100 years. I think with all the advancements in technology that we currently have and technologies that we currently have, I think would be here sooner than later, but I think it's about the implementation and how it can be done.
So for the people who sell firearms, would mandatory lessons in like psychology 101, like basically instead of going through something that the government makes you take, like maybe on a side note, like they take a psych class or maybe semester of a class just to get a little more
I wouldn't suggest for someone to take a psych class
Mm-hmm.
because my concern would be is you could potentially be teaching someone how to get around a test that could be administered. In other words, let's
So
say they wanted to
even.
have a psychological test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone who has taken the psych classes might be able to invalidate the test.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. So. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? It's like if that person takes a couple of classes, you're preparing someone who might not necessarily have formed an ill intent,
Mm-hmm.
but giving them the resources on how to answer the questions. Because
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you mean. So, do you think it would be better for retired law enforcement officers or ex-military to sell firearms instead?
well, right now the system in place is we previously discussed the FFL, which is a federal firearms license that you have to have. So before you can sell a firearm in California, you have to possess this federal license. Then you have to be approved by the California Department of Justice, okay? And then from there, it goes to either the county or the city that will allow you to sell within that city the firearm. And for that matter, ammunition. I mean, the number of gun stores that are out there now has probably gone down by a factor of 4 from how it used to be.
So, you think that they might be biased if there was like a retired law enforcement officer or ex-military selling, or is it not like a case of biasness? It's more like you just don't want the government to control.
Again, now we're getting into the constitutional aspects, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge difference between should, shall, and may, right? Shall is indefinite. There is no wiggle room, right?
Yeah.
It's letter of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Versus a should or may or can. That's kind of the spirit.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to the gun stores, that should be up to the individual as long as they can pass the required background that they have to have.
So, what would you try or want things to change about the purchase of guns, like the law and firearms?
I would like to see, because right now in California, there's a list of prohibited misdemeanors as well as the convicted felons that can't purchase.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the health and safety code, which is 5150, danger to themselves or others,
Mm-hmm.
if someone's been placed on that. But I would like for them to see an expansion on the prohibited misdemeanors.
So that means
Like a battery, just because someone's been convicted of a battery doesn't mean that they didn't injure someone. That just meant that they probably pled it down from a felony to a misdemeanor.
So you're saying there should be a wider range of like restrictions on people who have like you said, like felony to misdemeanor, like
Correct.
that pled guilty.
Correct. And the understanding behind that. So in other words, if it was it truly a battery, which is basically just someone pushing somebody, would be a battery.
Mm-hmm.
Versus someone taking a baseball bat and clonking someone upside the head, which is assault with a deadly weapon. Sometimes that gets pled down to felony battery or just a misdemeanor battery. So I would like to have that expanded to determine people who had those charges pled down not have a firearm.
So do you think what you want this to change? Like, do you think it would be possible for this to happen anytime soon?
No.
Why and how long do you think it would take?
I think there are two sides. Let's just say a very progressive side and a very conservative side that I don't see them meeting in the middle to resolve anything. Because you have one side who wants to completely ban guns
Mm-hmm.
for every citizen, regardless, lawful or whatever, right?
So not even for a cop.
Exactly. Then you have another side that, well, you should have fully automatic weapons, which is unreasonable.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess like topic of gun is something like you said both sides will never reach an agreement on. And so is there anything that you learned while you were in law enforcement that you would like to share?
Yeah.
One thing that stood out. Well, maybe 1 to 3 things that stood out to you. And that you still use in everyday life.
Wow, that I still use in everyday life.
There has to be something.
My career, I spent my whole career being told I was wrong.
Oh.
But seriously, though, I think it's empathy and active listening.
And
most important is respect.
Why empathy, listening, and respect?
Because oftentimes, as a police officer or a sheriff's deputy, you're having an interaction where you're having to be the authoritative person, whether it's removing someone's parent or removing the child from a bad situation. You're always looked at as the bad person. But having the ability to listen to somebody and to connect on a completely different level where the person that you're talking to, knows that you understand and you believe in them,
mm-hmm.
It's important.
So, what do you tell people who are scared of cops or dislikes them? Like, what would you tell them? Like, would you tell them to not to judge before you like get to know them? Because it's like, I forgot that phrase, but like, you can't judge until you get to know a book by its.
You can't judge a book by its cover
until
you've read the pages.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was trying to say.
I would ask first, why the prejudice? And why are they prejudiced against law enforcement?
Well, they're probably prejudiced against law enforcement because either someone in their family or themselves has gotten into a really big like problem, or they just don't like them because of how the media. Yeah.
Okay, so you know what I would ask that person?
What?
Is every single person that you know in law enforcement or the military the worst person in the world? The answer to that usually is going to be no.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you take a small segment, and again, we're going to get in the whole statistics aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was horrible at statistics. I still remember p-hat squared and all that stuff, but if you look at the statistical aspects of it,
mm-hmm.
if you take any group, any number, you're always going to have a small percentage of that number that's going to be bad.
Just like in politics.
What's that?
Just like in politics.
Well, I would pretty much say almost 100% there.
Oh. Okay.
But if you look at it, that small percentage, and I guess let's go with the politics aspect too.
Mm-hmm.
That small percentage of somebody or people, it affects the other 900,000 people doing the job every day. You take 1% of 900,000, you have 9,000, which is pretty much what, 200 per state that would be considered bad. I mean, it's horrible. The number's too high if you ask me. That's why the standards to be a police officer are set like they are. You take your written, you do your interview, you do your physical agility, you go through the medical, you go through the polygraph, you go through the voice stress, you go through your psych, then you go through your interview with the psychologist, then they do your background. They determine your creditworthiness. There's a whole bunch of things that you have to go through.
So it's not as simple as everyone thinks.
People think being a police officer is just, I want to be a cop, so I'm going to do that. You know how there's a lot of people that say they want to be a professional athlete?
Mm-hmm.
It's what, 0.5%? Well, it's about 0.1% of the people that actually become a police officer and finish their training. So everyone growing up will say, hey, I want to be a police officer. And for one reason or another, they decide not to.
Mm-hmm.
But from the time that you go through the testing, it's called the vetting process, till the time you've passed your probation,
mm-hmm.
you're at about 0.1%. And again, we go back to that number as far as bad police officers. I think that number's too high. I think the ones that are bad, that are dirty cops, they need to be taken care of. They need to be whipped, caned, whatever it is. Because I don't like what it does to the whole profession as a whole.
Like, it basically tarnishes the name of the good cops.
It doesn't tarnish it. It completely destroys it. Because you've taken the trust from the public. And
as well as the people. As well as the people in the department as well.
Correct.
Because you guys, like, build a bond.
Well, I've been called pig. I mean, I've been called some pretty horrific things.
Which isn't fair, but I guess you can't, like...
I would encourage people to have a conversation. I've had people tell me, like, you know, I hate your MFing ass, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you know me? No? Wow, that's really prejudicial.
Yeah, so since I have friends and
Yeah.
family that don't like cops at all, and I'm probably the only person in my family that doesn't dislike cops.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing is I grew up as like the delinquent child,
Me too.
I'm like the closest with the cops, and they're just wondering how do they not notice the bad behaviors and everything. It's like, I don't get it. I
was expelled from school.
I was almost expelled.
No, I was.
Oh.
When you're expelled, you go through a formal expulsion hearing. And I had that. And I was pretty young. Thankfully, it was a suspension. So the attorneys that my family got were very good. Thankfully. I would just say this. People that are sheriff's deputies, police officers,
mm-hmm.
are normal, everyday people.
Yeah, they have feelings.
I have one, according to some people. Maybe two. But normal people, we have bad days. Everyone has bad days.
Definitely.
It's understanding.
Yeah, even a baby does.
Exactly.
Yeah, babies can have bad days. Anyone can.
Exactly. And you look at that right there, I would just encourage people, you know, like this, they do Coffee with the Cop now, which I think is one of the greatest outreaches that you can do.
And can you explain a little further what that is about?
Coffee with the Cop is, they do it in San Francisco, they'll do it in every jurisdiction does.
Do you just have coffee with a bunch of cops?
Yeah, well, no, it's for the community to come and sit down with the officers and talk. I've had people come up and say, you know, I hate your ass. Okay, you don't know me. Let's have a conversation. Because if someone's willing to be civil, it's kind of like a debate, because it's give and take. We don't have to agree on everything all the time. That's what gives us our uniqueness.
See, I find that interesting what you just said, like how they said that they don't like you, and yet the fact that you're willing to sit down and have a conversation which you can choose to not be a part of, means like, it's like, you know how the media portrays cops and everything, like, oh, they're all bad and it's all about police brutality and everything. They don't ever focus on the fact, like, on Snapchat I saw a video with this general who just came back from a tour, and it was maybe 12-1, and they saw two African-American boys shivering in the cold while it was raining, and he just came back from Iraq, and he thought they were gonna do something, but because his training taught him to analyze everything, and the kids would ask him if he had any money, and what stood out to me was the general didn't even know the kids, but what shocked everyone at the Taco Bell at 12 in the morning was that the general brought the two kids food without knowing them, without expecting anything, and the little kid was like, I want to be like you one day, and that definitely made me happy because he fed the kids and also inspired people. So I don't get why the media always portrays like the police brutality. It's like, it's kind of your jobs, like, not to brutalize people, but to enforce the right amount of...
Do you know why the media does it?
Because they don't like you?
Because it generates headlines, and
they generate money.
And it generates increased viewership, which gives them a better share to sell advertising. So
basically newspapers, as well as politicians, only care about themselves and their own agendas, is what you're trying to say. I
would agree with that. I've been misquoted in the papers before.
You have?
I have. I have been mischaracterized in the papers before. And it's all about context, right? And are there good reporters out there? There are. I will tell you that right now. There's like, they realize their mistake. Hey, Smith, this was screwed up. I'll get taken care of. Whew, thank you. Or you tell a joke at the wrong time on TV. It doesn't get out. Don't get me wrong, there are some great reporters out there. There's also some bad ones.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the statistics that we were talking about.
Just like any other profession, like lawyers, doctors, uh, people that run.
Teachers.
Teachers aren't as bad.
Clergy.
That, yeah. Teachers, actually, no, never mind. I take my word back on that. There are bad teachers.
There are horrible teachers.
But yeah,
Let's put it this way. When I chose to get involved in law enforcement, people always like to say it was your choice. But I never had a job until then that it wasn't determined by myself if I was able to go home. Because I was putting it in other people's hands. People that I didn't know. I didn't have the opportunity to run away from gunfire. I had to go towards it. And that's where you really question, what are you really doing this for? It's not for yourself. It's for the people that you don't know, that you serve for.
yeah, and it's a pretty selfless.
I don't know. I mean, there's also some fun things, chasing people.
Yeah, but
driving
you're
really
still
fast.
you're driving fast. You're chasing people, but you're still putting your life on the line. There could be an option of you could choose to not go through police academy and get your badge, because why else do you think there are that few? Like, there's a lot of us in this whole country. Why do you think only a certain select few become a police officer or choose to become a police officer? Because they're thinking about others before themselves, which is something most people cannot do. And for anyone who's in like law enforcement, military, any type of profession that involves you risking your life every day, I don't care who says what, but I'm thankful for that, because we wouldn't be here. There would be no law and order, despite what others would say about it. Like, there wouldn't be law and order, because it'd be like the purge. Like,
yeah.
The criminals would be out raping, killing, shooting, robbing, and well, if the cops weren't there, what would happen? They would just be like the hierarchy. Like, citizens would be stuck on the bottom. You'd have to kill to survive, killed or be killed. That phrase.
Well, and you know what? It also goes into behavior. What is an innate behavior versus what's the learned behavior? And I think the world is made up of all types of people. Some good, some bad.
Some in the middle.
And some of them, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a unique person to just understand that at the end of the day, your whole goal is to make an impact. Even when you can't see it. Is that hopefully there was that one person that makes the career worth it. So.
Well, yeah. Thank you.
No, you're awesome. Thank you.